Hi everybody, I'm Trish Christ. In this episode of Our Nashville, NECAT and our super crew of teenagers spend some time with Senior Ride Nashville. Executive Director Carrie Brumfield and her team are going to show and tell us all the cool things they do in our community. Are you ready, Carrie?
Yeah.
Are you ready, super crew?
Yeah.
Let's tell the story.
It's our Nashville.
Esto es nuestro Nashville.
It's our Nashville.
It's our Nashville.
We all know how to talk about our organization during meetings, but what about the chance encounter of a lifetime? You never know who may share your next elevator, notice your logo on a notebook or a tote bag, and ask what you do. What's the clearest, most persuasive thing you can say in a short elevator ride?
Senior Ride Nashville is a relatively young organization with a mission to improve the quality of life of older adults in the Nashville-Davidson County community by providing affordable and assisted transportation that's powered by volunteer drivers to non-driving older adults of our community. Transportation has been at the top of the list of unmet needs for seniors in our community for a number of years. And Nashville currently has over 80,000 residents aged 65 and older.
I didn't realize that.
Yes, and 30,000 of those older adults are 75 and older. And that's a demographic that is most often unable to drive due to age-related physical limitations. And once an older adult gives up the keys to their vehicle, they suffer from poor health and depression and isolation. And so that's something that we hope to address through this transportation program.
I happen to know that your nonprofit was created through a very interesting process. Will you tell us when that started and how this great idea came into existence?
The Council on Aging of Middle Tennessee was formed in the mid-'80s with a mission to improve the lives of older adults throughout Middle Tennessee. And they were able to recognize over a decade ago the need for an affordable transportation service for older adults. And back in 2015, they convened what they named the Senior Transportation Leadership Coalition, which was a group of leaders throughout the Nashville community from aging services, transportation services. But this group came together, spent about 2 years studying the need to better understand how they could address it. And after 2 years of intense planning and research, Senior Ride Nashville was ultimately born.
I'm Grace Smith. I'm the Executive Director of the Council on Aging of Middle Tennessee. We have talked about this among service providers since the mid-1990s is when I first started being part of the conversation about the unmet need for senior transportation, and particularly for the need for door-through-door assisted transportation. And so you fast forward to 2015, and the conversation was still going on. What are we going to do about senior transportation? The needs are growing. We have to do something now. And it seemed like it was the right time to bring organizations together. And we had a very dynamic board member, Ed Cole, who stepped up and said, I'll be willing to lead a coalition if you'll help form it and you'll host the meetings. We had 17 organizations as part of our coalition, and what was really exciting to me was the willingness of these groups to just roll up their sleeves and for a year and a half meet on a monthly basis and in between have homework where we were studying models around the country. What are other cities doing that seem to be working well? And we ended up seeing volunteer transportation programs everywhere. And so we looked at those models. We looked at Austin, Texas. We looked at the ITN model, which is in several major cities. We looked at Blount County, Tennessee, which has a strong volunteer transportation program, Knoxville, Tennessee, and started having conversations with those providers. What are you doing? How are you doing it? How do you structure the service? How do you, what are your hours of operation? How do you make sure that you can safely meet the needs of the riders? And that informed our work in identifying best practices and identifying features that we wanted for a service in Nashville. And finally coming up really with our own blended model that became Senior Ride Nashville.
My name is Ed Cole, and I have the honor of serving as board chair for Senior Ride Nashville. When the coalition first came together to develop Senior Ride Nashville, we found it real important to include public transportation people from the MTA and Tennessee Department of Transportation, because we did not want to duplicate the good services that are already existing. So if a person is fully handicapped and requires full assistance on a trip, then Access Ride is the service that MTA would provide for that person. And we did not want to replicate that because that's a very different kind of transportation. So we make it very easy if somebody calls and says, well, I'm totally involved with a wheelchair and I need to be able to get in and out of a vehicle that can lift my chair in and out, then we help them connect up with Access Ride. So it was real helpful. We didn't want to replicate. We wanted to supplement each other. Likewise, if Access Ride gets a call from someone who says, I can walk to the car, I just have to be slow, then they would call Senior Ride Nashville and we'd be the ones to help provide the trip. So if an older person sees information about Senior Ride Nashville, there's a telephone number, and we generally do that connection by telephone. We can do it by computer, but telephone's preferable for most folks. And they make a call. That person would call Senior Ride Nashville, and staff at Senior Ride Nashville would ask them some basic questions about their circumstances. And assuming that all looks good, in most cases it would, the next thing that would happen is there'd be a home visit. This is a real important part of Senior Ride Nashville. As a part of our program, we would have a social worker, someone with training that would actually go visit that person in their own home. And two things really happen when that visit occurs. First of all, we get more information about the person, where they live, where they would like to be picked up. Are they mobile enough to get in and out of a car? That's important. But it also provides some security to the person who wants a ride, because somebody's come to their house, they have proper identification, they've gone through a process, so there's a legitimacy to Senior Ride Nashville that would not necessarily be as easy to see if the first time they encountered Senior Rides when somebody rolled up with a car. As we've talked to different groups of people about possible volunteer drivers, we find a wide range of people. Clearly, volunteer drivers need to have some time available during the day, and so that tends to focus more on older drivers. We have a higher percentage of retired people who are volunteer drivers than we expected. We have people who have flexible work schedules. We have people who have relatives, they're caregivers themselves, and realize the value of volunteering. So it's really a cross-section, but I think probably the largest group of volunteer drivers are those that are either not quite yet considering themselves older or really are older but still have the ability to drive, and that's the gift that can be given.
When I was in high school, so in the 80s, my grandmother was 86 at the time, I remember, because she had been born right before the turn of the 20th century. So she was an elderly lady when I was in high school, and she didn't want to bother the family to take her to the grocery store, much less doctor visit where you might have to wait for a while. She didn't want to bother her busy son and my mom or me, because I could drive at the time. And so her solution at 86 was she wanted us to help her buy a motorcycle. So she'd never driven. She was of a generation of lady that didn't learn how to drive.
Wow.
And so a car was a bit intimidating for her, but she wanted us to get her a motorcycle at her expense so that she wouldn't have to bother us to take her on these errands. Now, needless to say, my parents and I were not about to let my 86-year-old grandmother, who'd never driven anything, get a motorcycle in 1986. But I see in that the independent drive, no pun intended, drive that you're describing in seniors who still want to leave the house and do things and be free to go wherever they want to go.
That's right. Your grandmother sounds like a very brave, you sound like a very brave woman. But yes, we find that just the independence and dignity that is associated with being able to get to the destinations that you need to go is so incredibly important to all of us. And if we just consider for a moment what our lives would be like if we didn't have access to a car, if we didn't have access to be able to get to the next, to the bus stop down the road, how that would affect our lives. And so many seniors do come into the program and share with us that they have family members in town, but they feel like a burden, and they want to be able to take care of their own needs and get to the destinations that they need to go to on their own. And Senior Ride Nashville, with the help of volunteer drivers, is able to meet that need for many seniors.
Let's talk logistics. So let's say I am my grandmother. Let's say I am that senior who wants a solution. How do I connect with you guys the first time? Do I pay up front? What's it going to cost me? How does it work? How do I do it?
So our service is designed for older adults age 60 or older that no longer drive or limit their driving. So a lot of our seniors are still comfortable driving to the neighborhood grocery store, but maybe not that doctor's appointment in Midtown or wherever it may be. They would be able to transfer in and out of a vehicle with limited assistance, and they would call our office or visit seniorridenashville.org to obtain an application. Once that application is completed back in our office, we would schedule an appointment for an in-home assessment. We partner with an in-home health provider that visits with each of our applicants to ask some questions about their medical background, to see that they are able to move with limited assistance and get in and out of a car without being lifted, because of course our volunteer drivers wouldn't be able to lift a rider into a vehicle.
And there would be some liability involved for all parties once you get into physically helping someone.
That's right. That's right. And so once they go through that application process and successfully complete the home visit, then they would be enrolled as members. There is a fee to participate. We did learn from focus groups before we launched the dignity that is associated for older adults to pay their way. But Senior Ride Nashville was designed to be very affordable, so hopefully would be an easy cost for our riders.
My name is Matt Shaw, and I'm the treasurer for Senior Ride Nashville. There's a membership fee that's asked from our riders, and that's $25 annually. And each ride we ask for a contribution of $6 per ride. Now there are some scholarship opportunities and ways that we can work with those that need assistance with those fees, but that's what we ask from our riders. What has helped tremendously for Senior Ride Nashville in its early phases is the support not only from some of our corporate sponsors, but also a federal and state grant that is administered through MTA. Without the support of the organizations behind us and the grant funds and the contributions that are made personally, the fees alone would not support the organization. The idea would be to eventually have those fees from the riders help support the organization in a larger capacity. It would become a larger part of our budget, but at this point, being a startup and a new organization, those numbers are small in comparison to the overall budget. Primarily, the expenses early on are for infrastructure. We've got to have great people like our executive director, Carrie Brumfield, and those that are in the office that are helping connect those riders with the volunteer drivers on a day-to-day basis. So a lot of the initial costs are for infrastructure. Outside expenses are relatively, don't want to say nominal, but they're what you would expect from an organization our size.
$6 round trip ride.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Custom ride, not even plugging the bus or a taxi, someone who knows you and knows your name and who is not going to just drop you at the door of your doctor's appointment. That's already pretty amazing. And I think we're talking about a significant period of time too. It's not like I'll drop you off and then I'll come back for you necessarily, or it must all be completed within 30 minutes or an hour or something like that. Tell us about the the time frame we're talking about for one customer, one driver?
We do ask for reservation notice. Currently, we ask for a minimum of 3 business days for a rider to schedule a trip so that we can put those details onto an online scheduling calendar that our volunteers can log in and view and self-select rides that they are able to accommodate. So when they log in and look at the calendar, they'll see, you know, exactly where the rider is, you know, where they need to be picked up, where they need to go, approximately how many miles and the length of the trip. And we'll tell our volunteers, you know, we'll ask them to call and confirm that they have selected that trip, confirm the trip details with the rider prior to the trip to make sure that everything's on the same page. A lot of times our volunteers will be asked by the rider, would you mind to help me through the grocery store? I have trouble reaching the top shelf, or, you know, there might be some visual impairment or other needs. And so those are, if we know of those requests, which we usually do, we will put those in the trip notes so that the volunteer is aware. Sometimes sometimes our riders are very independent and they want to do their grocery shopping on their own. And so they might tell us, you know, I'd like to be left alone in the grocery store. And so we'll let the volunteer know those details as well. If they don't specify if they would like the driver to stay with them or not, we'll tell our volunteers, you know, when you're making that call to confirm the trip details, just chat with them like you would your grandmother or your aunt or your neighbor about taking this trip together, and work it out so that it works for the both of you, because it's as important to us that the volunteer driver is satisfied in this interaction as well. And so it may be, you know, when they call to, you know, work out those trip details, they might work it out to say, you know, the rider could say, I'm gonna be in this appointment for an hour and a half, just, you know, give me your cell phone number, I'll call you when I'm ready. So it's a really flexible opportunity for a volunteer driver.
So if I sign on to be a volunteer driver for you, what am I committing to?
We ask that our volunteers give a minimum of 2 rides a month. Of course, we appreciate if they're able to give more, but ask that they might be willing to consider a minimum of 2 rides a month. We certainly understand that that might not be available to them each and every month, but that is our request.
I gather that there's kind of a social element too, not just providing a logistical resource, but there's some fun on both sides of the partnership.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is, I think, what makes our program really, really special. Is not only are we able to provide an affordable transportation option to people that don't have alternatives, but we're also able to pair them with the most wonderful human beings in Nashville that are signing up to deliver these rides. And we hear the phrase, it's more than just a ride, so frequently from our volunteer drivers, because they are making relationships. Our riders are making connections with the drivers and vice versa. We've heard of so many stories of those relationships developing and going, you know, far beyond the ride itself, maybe getting together for dinner, inviting each other into their homes. And so it's just a really wonderful way for volunteer drivers to meet a remarkable segment of Nashville's population that unfortunately is often forgotten and unseen. And it's a really wonderful way for our seniors to maintain some social connection. And maintaining that social connection is so critical to your quality of life and your health. And so we're really delighted that that's a byproduct of the service that we operate.
My name is Linda West. I've been doing Senior Ride for a little over a year now. It's been fantastic. It's a wonderful program. I worked for about 30 years in the senior field, so I know how important the transportation issue is for seniors. And it's been a lifesaver for me. I lost my husband of almost 50 years unexpectedly. And just shortly after that happened, I saw the thing about senior ride, and I knew that was for me. And it's been a blessing. It's helped me get through a lot of the depression and the pain of losing my husband. And I've met so many wonderful people. The riders are just fantastic. We've developed friendships. You know, we do things other than the rides, and it's just been a blessing for me. It's always a joy to get to see you, because when I open the door, it's always Linda, you know, and she's got a big grin on her face, and she gives me my daily devotional, and then, you know, some words of inspiration, and then she and I start giggling about stuff and carrying on conversations, talking about our families and all. And I've just developed several different friendships through Senior Ride. You know, like I say, doing things, we'll go out to lunch or go to dinner or go to a movie. Several of the riders, you know, I have gotten to be close friends with. There's several of them that have helped me so much. They have been as big a help to me as I have to them with the rides. It's a wonderful program. I'd love to see a lot more people volunteer for it, because you get so much more than what you give. You really do.
I'm Celia Bolarte. My experience with the senior ride, like Linda, I have been blessed from day one. One day, it was a rainy day, raining, cats and dogs. And Celia was driving at age 87. And I bumped in a trash can that was built with cement. And I said, Lord, what happened to me? And what happened, it was, instead I stopping, but because I was supposed to stop, I accelerate. That was the end of my driving. And well, I was in the 54 wards, Madison, Tennessee. I was doing my exercises of yoga. I was doing my sneakers, so I can, you know, keep up with nice figure and well, and keep going in life and have my social life. And do you know, like from heaven, Brandy told me, Celia, don't worry, that's a place where you can call and they come and pick you up. And it's called the Senior Ride Nashville. Oh, do you think they can pick me up from Suterra, Madison? Oh, yes, just call. Well, I said, well, I called the very next day. And they have to assess me, I have to wait 3, 4, 5 days before they accept me, because they want to do my assessment. Well, finally they accept me. I became very familiar with them. I loved them. I developed a friendship to the point that I call them like it's my family. I hug them, we have good time. You don't know how much good time we have. We talk about our feelings, we are sounding board for each one, and we discuss about our days and what we are going to even eat. What do you like, what do you don't like? But it's excellent. They give me a tender and loving care.
For folks who are watching us right now and maybe hearing about Senior Ride for the first time or in this much detail for the first time and want to help, what can they do to further the endeavors of Senior Ride Nashville?
We would just really appreciate if anybody who is touched by the work that we are doing, if they know somebody that might be able to support the work by becoming a volunteer driver, please help us spread the word. We formed in November of 2017, so we're still trying to make ourselves better known in the Nashville community. And every share on Facebook, every social media following really does go a long way for us. If you might be willing to invite us to talk to your civic group, invite us to your church, invite us to share what we are doing to an audience that might have some potential volunteer drivers. there would really go a long way for Senior Ride Nashville. The demand for this service is massive, and we are working really hard to keep up with, to build capacity to be able to serve as many seniors as we possibly can.
This is what we call the speed round. And it's just like the game of questions we used to play when we were kids, where I ask you something and the first thing that comes to your mind,
Oh dear.
let it fly.
Okay.
And we'll jump on to the next one.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Sure.
Speed round with Carrie Brumfield.
All right.
True or false? There is a great number of seniors who no longer drive.
True.
True or false? There are still other seniors who perhaps should no longer drive, but don't know of an affordable, safe, enjoyable alternative.
Also true.
What is such an alternative?
Senior Ride Nashville.
Imagine that. Why is the freedom to go places important?
Maintaining dignity is important to our quality of life, as is access to medical treatment, as is access to fresh food at the grocery store. And we all have to get out of our homes to access the world.
Name 2 types of people who are volunteer drivers.
We have a lot of women. I think about 75% of our volunteer driving corps are female, and caring and compassionate people are those that come to our door.
Do you have a lot of retired people?
We do. We have a lot of folks that are new retirees that are looking for ways to stay connected and to give back. So, and they also recognize that this is a service that they could use one day. And a lot of those volunteers as well, recognize the need for the service because they have or are caring for senior loved ones.
Yes. Yes. True or false? A senior using Senior Ride to get to a doctor's appointment, for example, could become stranded there.
False.
I'm not good with computers, and I don't have a cell phone. How do I book Senior Ride?
Give us a call, 615-610-4040.
Awesome. And last of all, my friend, what is your website?
SeniorRideNashville.org.
Thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you, Trish.
It's our Nashville.